In the context of mass mind control, crisis is not merely an unfortunate disruption. It is a deliberate mechanism of psychological conditioning. Repeated crises, particularly those which provoke collective fear, grief, outrage, or anxiety, serve a strategic function. They disorient the public, override rational processes, and establish a climate in which compliance appears both necessary and virtuous. This lecture explores how emotional upheaval, when systematically introduced, becomes a powerful tool for molding public perception and behavior. At the core of this phenomenon is the neurological reality that strong emotion, especially fear, suppresses higher order cognition. Under stress, the brain shifts from the prefrontal cortex, responsible for logic and critical thinking, into the amygdala, which governs instinctual survival responses. In this state, individuals do not evaluate information, they seek safety. They follow perceived authority, they look for solutions outside themselves. Fear, then, is not simply a reaction to crisis, it is the psychological lubricant through which consent is manufactured and control is exerted. Crucially, the power of emotional conditioning lies in its cumulative effect. A single crisis may jolt the public temporarily, but repeated and unresolved emotional shocks foster a state of learned helplessness, a psychological condition in which individuals come to believe that resistance is futile and that the safest course of action is to conform. In such an environment, obedience is no longer experienced as submission, but as prudence. This subtle redefinition of safety as alignment with authority is central to emotional conditioning. The emotional volatility generated by sustained crisis serves to anchor the public in a reactive state. The population is never afforded the space to process, reflect, or critically evaluate the narrative being presented. Instead, they are continually shifted from one emotional stimulus to another, each invoking a sense of urgency, danger, or moral outrage. The tempo of crisis becomes its own form of control, instilling a psychological dependence on institutions that claim to offer stability amid the chaos. In this reactive condition, behavioral responses are shaped not through argument or persuasion, but through repetition and emotional priming. The mechanisms are Pavlovian in nature. Fear a particular threat often enough, and people will begin to respond automatically to its mention. Trust a particular authority figure repeatedly in times of crisis, and people will come to associate that figure with safety, even in the absence of logic or results. This conditioning is not ideological, it's emotional. Moreover, crisis-based conditioning operates through contrast. By consistently pairing the presence of fear with disorder and the presence of authority with resolution, the public learns to associate obedience with emotional relief. In this dynamic, submission is not coerced through overt force, but encouraged as the only rational escape from anxiety. It is a form of psychological shortcut. Think less, comply faster, and feel better. Importantly, the role of emotion in this process must not be underestimated. Emotional states are not simply internal experiences, they are programmable frameworks for interpretation. When fear is active, facts are filtered. Dissenting information is more likely to be dismissed as threatening, irrational, or dangerous. In this way, emotional conditioning not only steers behavior, it constrains perception. The emotional filter becomes the epistemological lens through which all information is interpreted. Thus, crisis becomes more than a political tool, it becomes an epistemic weapon. It shapes not only what people believe, but how they are capable of believing. Over time, repeated emotional conditioning narrows the public's range of acceptable thoughts, actions, and questions. It produces not just compliance, but complicity, because people come to believe that their actions are rational, when in fact, they are the result of engineered emotional stimuli. In conclusion, emotional conditioning through crisis is a foundational method of mass mind control. It bypasses logic, short-circuits autonomy, and reinforces institutional power by fostering a permanent sense of instability. The antidote is not merely skepticism, but the cultivation of emotional awareness and resilience. Only when the individual can observe emotional triggers without being consumed by them can the cycle of psychological dependency be broken. The mind, once freed from reflexive fear, can begin to perceive the machinery behind the crisis, and in doing so, reclaim its autonomy.